Admiral Charles Richard, commander of the US Strategic Command, has a dire warning for Americans. We might be compelled to fight a nuclear war against China or Russia. He believes that if either of these two nations were to face a regional crisis, it could quickly escalate into a conflict that involves nuclear weapons. That is, if they think that a loss might end up threatening the state or the existing power structure. The Admiral wants the Pentagon to shift its principal assumption regarding the use of nuclear weapons from nearly impossible to a very real possibility. He warned that the US could not approach atomic deterrence in the same way it has done over the past decades. Instead, it should be allowed to evolve to face the dynamic global environment that the country is now facing. In this new era of competition, this will be the first time in our nation's history that we will have to face two nuclear-capable peers by the end of this decade. We need to be ready to respond to cross-domain threats to ensure the security of our nation and allies by thinking holistically about strategic deterrence in the 21st century, he said to the Washington Times. Admiral Richard wants the US government and military leaders to have a better knowledge of new dangers that can emerge from a nuclear conflict and think of novel ways to deter such occurrences, including updated nuclear warfighting strategies. He warned that if the Defense Department fails to accept America's reality and refuse to make necessary changes, the country will fight a war for which it is ill-prepared because the circumstances have drastically changed, with the new transformations still not taken into account. The Admiral's warning comes on the back of the Biden administration extending the New START nuclear treaty with Russia for an additional 5 years. The agreement, which is the last remaining nuclear weapons treaty America has with Russia, came into effect in 2011 and placed restrictions on the number of nuclear weapons that can be deployed. It also includes a verification process that allows both countries to conduct on-site inspections to ensure they comply with the treaty. Russian officials announced that the extension of the agreement was according to their terms. Former President Trump did not want to renew the treaty since Russia had refused to adhere to the pact. In an interview with Fox News, ex-Secretary of State Mike Pompeo pointed out how the Biden administration has committed a massive blunder by extending the New START treaty. The Chinese Communist Party now holds weapons systems and is testing missiles at an alarming rate. Our administration was working to bring the Chinese inside the arms control structure. We were close to doing it at one point. Now the leverage to convince the Russians that they too need to work to bring the Chinese into this structure is all gone, Pompeo said. China's influence operations in Britain have received a major hit after the UK cracked down on Beijing-backed media outlet CGTN. UK's Office of Communications, the country's communications regulator, revoked CGTN's broadcast licence following an investigation that concluded that Star China Media Limited did not meet legal requirements to hold the licence. Ofcom noted that Star China does not have the editorial responsibility for the channel's content, thus making its licence invalid. CGTN had tried to transfer the licence to a new entity to remain operational. However, after regulators discovered that the media outlet would continue under the Chinese Communist Party's control, it decided to stick with disqualifying the broadcaster. CGTN will cease operations in the UK with immediate effect. It can request a judicial review and apply for another licence in the future. The licence revocation comes when the Chinese regime is going full throttle with its plan of expanding media influence across Europe to build its image and soft power. The media outlet had established a European operations hub in West London and hired several journalists to boost operations. CGTN's other international operational bases are located in Nairobi and Washington, D.C. Last year, Ofcom had found CGTN guilty of breaching impartiality rules during its coverage of the Hong Kong protests. The regulator has indicated that it might place sanctions on the media company for such reportage. Meanwhile, victims of the CCP's human rights abuses have hailed the CGTN licence revocation as a historically significant decision. Safeguard Defenders, a human rights NGO, points out that CGTN had aired numerous recordings of forced confessions. These are confessions made by Chinese dissidents under threat and torture from the communist regime. The NGO notes that the broadcast of the confessions itself violates Ofcom's rules on impartiality. Peter Humphrey, a British ex-journalist who is a victim of forced confession, is elated at the Ofcom decision. While in China, he was arrested by authorities on charges of buying and selling personal data, which he denied. Officials tortured him until he agreed to read a statement they prepared as his confession. Seeing the licence revoked today is a moment of triumph, not only for me but also for all the other victims of this type of abuse. It's a slap on the face for the dictatorship in Beijing, Humphrey said to the Epoch Times.